When I saw the impact of my work and how it helped save patient lives, that's when I realized that sales is not something which is pushy, manipulative, or just forcing people to buy or even unethical. And that's when I realized that enabling women is not something which is you do as a favor. You enable them because you believe in their capability. Women apologize a lot for a lot of things, and we shrink and we kind of try to fit in to what the world expects us to be. But we need to be more bold in asking for the value we deserve. All of us are biased in some way or the other. Sometimes it's about color, sometimes it's about religion, sometimes it's about gender. And we see this happening all across in society, in TV serials, in movies, and therefore we justify it. So I said, do you realize that the woman who held your hand and actually taught you how to take your first step, your mother, she's obviously a woman. People may forget what you said, but they never forget how you make them feel. And that's why it's important not to humiliate or insult in public and take this conversation into a private zone. You have to be vocal about your achievements. You have to own them. You have to talk about them at every forum which matters. Self-advocacy is very important. Voice is important. Visibility is important. So I keep telling women this formula is VVA, visibility, voice, advocacy. And talk about your achievements, maintain an achievement diary, and be open about your ambitions and aspirations. If you don't own your career, somebody else will start writing your story for you. And that applies to life also, right? If you don't own your story, somebody else will write your story for you. When we go into a sales conversation with negative intent, assuming that the customer is going to say no, the customer is not going to like my offer, that's the energy we carry into the conversation, and the customer can sense that because energy is contagious. There is still a fact that women are undervalued and undercompensated and underrepresented in sales. These three U's. One of my favorite quotes is from Zig Ziglar: your attitude determines your altitude. So I hire for attitude and train for skill. That's what I've always believed, that skills can be taught, skills can be practiced. In a sales conversation, irrespective of whether you are an individual contributor or a team lead, you have to lead the conversation. Everywhere we are using selling and we are promoting ourselves and our brand. And if you cannot do that, you struggle throughout in your business as well as in your life. We follow a framework which I can share with you, and it is called Mike. And the reason I'm saying is because there are 4 C's. Sales is a landscape which constantly shifts. Relationships and bonds are what survive.
Hello. Welcome everyone to the Killer Sales Engine podcast. My name is Aum Janakiram, and for the next 1 hour, I am going to be your host, where I bring you great guests from the sales and marketing space, from leaders who have been there and done that. That's right. If you are someone who's struggling with how do you take your sales engine to the next level, you are in the right place. So our next guest is a person who has been a sales mentor in the space for a very, very long time. And she's an award-winning coach. She's someone who has mentored over 2,000 plus women. And she's here today to share with you a lot of insights as to what really, really makes the sales engine work. So without further ado, let me bring on Chitra Singh.
This is your sales growth playbook for founders and sales leaders who refuse mediocrity. Real conversations, real systems, real strategies that are battle tested for growth. These revenue generators have built in the trenches, turning effort into engines. Every Monday, we take you behind the mic and behind the noise, only on the Killer Sales Engine podcast with Aum Janakiram.
Hi, Chitra. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Om. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. I know that you're very busy. So let's start off with the most important thing that all our guests are dying to hear. Tell us a bit about yourself and how did you get from where you were to where you are right now?
Thank you for that. I'm the founder of Sales Mentoring, which is India's only exclusive sales community for women. I also mentor women deep tech entrepreneurs through NASCOM Foundation and startup business owners through Vagwani Foundation. Before this, I've spent about 27 years in banking sales, leading sales teams across some of India's largest banks like Kotak and ICICI. And I always found during these 27 years that women were highly underrepresented in sales, and especially at leadership levels, with less than 10% of sales leaders being women. And that's why after 27 years in banking sales, I decided to start something on my own, be the change that I want to see in the sales landscape, and launched a community for women, which is called Sales Women, India's only exclusive sales community for women in sales and business. And the purpose of this community is to enable 1 million women to sell with confidence and lead with conviction. So about my start, I fell into sales by default, I would say. And my first job was door to door, selling yellow pages, the Just Dial yellow pages. I don't know whether you've heard of that. And this was more than 30 years back. And at that time, there were no women in sales. And it was quite a terrifying experience, to say the least, because I was going door to door to small business owners, proprietors in an area called Gamdevi in Mumbai. And I had no way of knowing what was going to greet me on the other side of the door because they were small offices where the doors were shut. And sometimes I was greeted with amusement, sometimes surprise, sometimes amazement. Some people tried to flirt, some people just pushed me out of the door. And not having any support or any resources or any training whatsoever and just being dropped into it was quite a terrifying experience. But fortunately for me, my second experience was with Johnson and Johnson as a medical rep. Again, I was the only woman medical rep there, and there I found my love and passion for selling because I saw the impact that our product had on patient outcomes and their lives. Literally saved lives because we were selling surgical sutures, and that was used in complex operations by gynecs as well as neurosurgeons. And when I could see the impact that it saved patients' lives, it improved outcomes and healing for them, I developed this deep sense of pride and satisfaction and meaning in what I'm doing. Then on, the journey was only easier because my love for selling fueled um, fueled my journey. And in banking too, I saw the same effect and impact which we had on people's lives because we were helping people to achieve their dreams, to realize their aspirations, educate their children, get them married, maybe buy the new house, maybe buy their next car, and so on. And that's when I realized that sales is about helping and serving others and providing value. And that led to my passion and love for selling.
Amazing. I love how, I speak to a lot of people who have been in this space for a long time and they say they just happen to fall into sales or stumble into sales. And what I'm also noticing that also the majority of women, like you said, are far less than men. So my
Absolutely.
question to you is like, what really was the drive? I mean, you could have gone into marketing, you could have gone into operations, you could have gone into anything, but why sales specifically?
The first job I told you, it just found me by default. It was the job which was available at that point in time. But the second one, Johnson and Johnson, I wanted to do something which was impactful, which was meaningful. And since I had a
Mm,
PhD degree in biochemistry, it seemed natural that I would get into something pharmaceutical related. And I joined this company. When I saw the impact of my work and how it helped save patient lives, that's when I realized that sales is not something which is pushy, manipulative, or just forcing people to buy or even unethical. It is something which is meant to improve people's lives, to add value to their lives, and to help them find solutions to their problems.
mm,
And I found that I started enjoying this and interacting with people. So I continued in it. In banking too, it was the same impact which we had on people. In many cases, there are very moving stories about how we helped save a customer's father's life because he could not withdraw the money. The bank was closed. There was only 3,000 rupees was the ATM limit and so on. All of us withdrew money from our respective accounts from the ATM because the branch was closed. And at that time, the ATM limit was only 3,000 rupees. So each of us withdrew 3,000 rupees and we thought even if it doesn't come back, it's like, some donation we've given to save somebody's life. 15,000 rupees totally we withdrew and we gave it to him. Of course, I knew he had a huge FD with us. So there was no risk, but nobody would have done that.
mm.
And when I saw how much meaning it added to their lives, it actually saved his father's life because his father had a heart attack. He came back later with his father, and I would say that was one of the most fulfilling moments of our lives. When you see this, and when you see the trust that customers have on you, and how much happiness you can give to them, you feel like you are a transformer or a happiness agent. That's what I keep telling my team. You're transforming lives, you're adding value, and you are adding happiness to their lives. So you're a happiness agent, not merely a salesperson.
Amazing. And I can tell you that, it's very rare that people find that kind of love and passion and service younger in their careers unless they have a very strong mentor who's able to bring out that culture in the team. So you becoming a mentor yourself must have been inspired by tons of mentors in your life who would have probably guided you in the right way. And maybe you might have had some really bad mentors who maybe did not guide you and realized, I don't want this to be a future for the people I work with. So could you shed a little light about maybe some of the people who have helped you in your past or some of the takeaways that have really shaped the way that you have built your career? One of the points you mentioned, that it's actually a service that we're selling and, to be able to think about, oh, everyone now, please take out 2,000 rupees from your ATMs and let's help this person. It doesn't come just by one person saying it. It comes from a culture that's being built. So
Yes.
can you help me understand that?
Yeah, so the first job, like I told you, was with Just Dial Yellow Pages. And that was, sorry to say, not a very pleasant experience because there was no support. But the second job in Johnson and Johnson, I had a job. I had a manager who was really, really tough. And this area which I had was 35 kilometers long from JJ Hospital in Mumbai to Mahim, which is a 35-kilometer stretch. And that was the Mumbai rains. And you know how they are, wading through needy quarters, sometimes even at 10 p.m., 11 p.m., because the doctors would make you wait till all their patients had been met. And you were the last. But they would definitely see me because I was a woman and they didn't want to let a woman go. So keep waiting like this in their reception. So they would see me, even if it was 10 or 10:30. And my boss was, as I already mentioned, really, really strict. And he had my journey cycle plan. In those days, it was obviously on a piece of paper, unlike today. And at 1 p.m., I was supposed to land up at a chemist opposite JJ Hospital. And that day it was pouring rain, water everywhere, flooding. And I thought, okay, let me wait in the hospital premises and go across to the chemist once the rain stops a bit. And to my bad luck, I reached 5 minutes late. So I reached at 1:05 to the chemist's shop. And then I found my boss waiting for me, to my bad luck. And he didn't say anything. We finished the call. We talked to the chemist. We went back to office. And then he asked me, why were you late? And I started stammering and, muttering excuses saying that, oh, it was just 5 minutes late. And then he told me that if you don't value your customer's time, the customer will not value you. And that was one of the most important lessons I learned, to be punctual and not to make excuses. And the second thing he told me, that you are not here to make excuses. You're here to make a difference. So these two things, that you don't value their time, they won't value you. Second thing is, you're not here to make excuses. No one cares for your excuses. You're here to make a difference to their lives. If you can do it, if you cannot, you have no right to be in this job. It was tough. But I think that was the foundation of my selling. And that is what fuels salespeople. Despite rejections, despite setbacks, despite failures, the whole philosophy that selling is about service, it's about value, and it's about leading the conversations with empathy, with integrity, with ethics and value. That's what I learned. And then through banking, of course, banking is all about ethics, because the currency of banking is trust. People trust you with their lifetime savings. And that time, again, there was one thing which my boss had said to me, that a professional behaves as she must and should, and not as she feels. You are the bank. So when you go to the customer, you are the bank. They don't see KV Kamath, they don't see Chanda Kochar, they don't see me. They see you. You are the face of the bank. So you must behave as you must and should, and not as you feel. You may feel angry, you may feel unhappy, you may be tempted to behave unprofessionally, but there you are the bank and you're not separate. And therefore, show your best face, because you are the one who is the brand influencer and the brand ambassador. That again remained with me throughout my life. And lastly, I would talk about two more. One in Kotak, where my immediate manager was stationed in Mumbai and I was stationed in Bangalore. And I was the only woman, again in Kotak, who was given permission to head a national business whilst remaining in Bangalore. All other national business heads were in Mumbai. Because my baby was small and I couldn't move at that point in time, he had offered me national head in Bangalore. So that was the first deviation, that he did not see my gender or my constraints as an obstacle. He saw it as an enabler for performance. And since he wanted me in his team and he thought my performance more than made up for these small constraints, he offered me this. So I continued here. But there were meetings in which I could not land up in Mumbai, which were called at short notice. He would stand in for me and he would go for those meetings and actually take notes and share them with me. And I don't think many managers would do this. And that's when I realized that enabling women is not something which you do as a favor. You enable them because you believe in their capability and you believe that they deserve to be in this position because of their merit. And it's not a favor because of their gender. And that put the seed inside me that I must do something to encourage more women to remain in banking, just like he encouraged me. Otherwise, I would have quit. Maybe I would have quit. Maybe I would have opted for another bank, which was in Bangalore and so on. But the reason I stayed was because the entire ecosystem was enabling me to stay and to do my best and give my best. And of course, my team performed the best. We were at 120% of our targets. And it was never that my gender came in the way of performance. Sometimes my team did not take me seriously and I had to prove myself, but my managers never questioned either my capabilities or my decisions, what time I was coming when I was feeding my baby. In fact, I was taking an hour off during lunch to come back and feed the baby. Because again, at that time, no flexi time, no work from home, nothing. And in all those constraints, we managed. And again, I called up one of my managers in ICICI Bank and I told him, sir, I hope you know that I am not in office between 1:30 and 3. So he says, did I ask you? Did I ask you any question? I said, then why are you justifying? And that's another lesson I learned there, that women apologize a lot for a lot of things, and we shrink and we kind of try to fit in to what the world expects us to be. But we need to be more bold in asking for the value we deserve, both at work and at home. And the more we negotiate for the value we deserve, the better we make our own lives. That's another reason I started Sales Womentory. A lot of reasons. Of course, to encourage more women in sales, but also to encourage more women to find their voice and to own their ambition and to write their story themselves to achieve leadership positions.
Amazing. And I think, the whole point of having good mentors who have molded certain values into you over time and have shown you that empathy and shown you that ability to be enabled rather than saying, oh, she's a woman, that's why this is like this. I mean, not to say that men don't make those same mistakes. They probably get away with it a little bit more differently than women. And that comes to my next point over here. It definitely, when the time when you were in your career, there was a lot more chauvinism that was happening compared to now. Obviously, with more information, with more people standing up for women, and the fact that it has become a very much a gender equality sort of environment. Apart from other diversity elements coming into the picture. But when the time when you were in your career, it must have been really hard. Like you mentioned, your colleagues or your teammates might not be on the same page as you, but you had a strong leader or mentor or manager who was able to hold it for you as well. So my question to you now is, how did you deal with the other things that are happening? You mentioned earlier people are trying to flirt with you. You had to stay late at night. You've got this, time when you had to maybe take maternal leave. People might be wondering, should we, have her on the team? She's just busy all the time. Is she hitting her numbers? So there's obviously, one thing that is in their minds that is rolling mainly maybe because of their own insecurity. That's a
Absolutely.
possibility.
Absolutely.
But I feel like there is a general overall, what I have seen, like, oh, she's like my mother, or she's like my sister, or that's the way I treat the women in my life, and they use that as an excuse. So I'm just curious, how did you navigate this ecosystem?
Well, I would say with empathy, warmth, and compassion, because like you said, many times it's not that people intentionally want to do this or to hurt you. It's something they've grown up with. And all of us are biased in some way or the other. Sometimes it's about color, sometimes it's about religion, sometimes it's about gender. And we see this happening all across in society, in TV serials, in movies, and therefore we justify it. And sometimes these are unconscious. We are not even aware that we have these biases, and it's important that you deal with them with empathy, with honesty, and with compassion, and see the real reason behind it instead of humiliating the person or even being confrontational. Because even in selling, it never works to confront the customer, because we don't want to prove the customer to be a fool, and we don't want to humiliate. Rather, we want to co-create an outcome which works for both of us. And the same thing applies to your colleagues or your reportees, that you want to co-create an outcome which works for both of you and create a culture of trust and genuine, transparent communication. So there was this reportee of mine, and he was heading the zone when I was the national head. I told you that I was based in Bangalore, and he was heading the zone, which is in the north. He was stationed in Delhi, and I happened to be in Delhi at that point in time visiting, and we had the team review. And of course, I was present in the review. And there was this one boy who hadn't opened any accounts whatsoever. Since we were in retail liabilities, our primary target was opening more accounts, and he hadn't opened a single account all of the entire week. And instead of asking him what support you require or what challenges are you facing, is there any personal problem, etc., etc., our man started yelling and screaming at the boy in front of everyone else. And then the last sentence, which was in Hindi, क्या तूने साले तूने क्या चूड़ी पहन रखी है, तूने एक भी account open नहीं की. So I was obviously wearing bangles, which I am wearing now. And I did not say anything. I said to the boy that आप प्लीज बाहर जाके वेट कीजिए, मुझे सर से कुछ बात करनी. So he said okay, and I told the rest also to leave the room. And then I asked him, I just showed my hand and I said, ye kya hai, in Hindi. So he said, I am sorry, ma'am. I said, I did not ask you to say sorry. I'm just asking you, what is this? So he said, yes, I know what it is, and I've made a mistake. I'm sorry. So I said, do you realize that the woman who held your hand and actually taught you how to take your first step, your mother, she's obviously a woman. The person who walks with you through life, your wife, is a woman. And the lady who's going to steer your career and help you walk through towards success is again a woman. And these three women are holding the most power in your lives, and they're actually controlling your destiny. So never again think that a woman is weak just because she's wearing bangles. And don't use these kind of words as insults. He realized what he's doing. Till today we are friends. So the fact was that I didn't say anything in front of everybody. I just told them, "Aap room chhod ke jaiye," which is what I was trying to tell you. Dealing with this with humility, empathy, compassion, and understanding that he's probably brought up in an environment like this. So he can't help the way he acts. Also, they're not used to women in the team. I remember when I was in meetings, the bad words would stop, right? So none of the galis would come in. And then people would say, please, please come on meetings, because then boss is a little more careful with the language. But unfortunately for them, I would be the first and the boss would talk to me and then, theek hai, aapka ho gaya, unless I was needed, and then start the galis, because that is the way with selling. It was the way for a long time till more women came into it. And I would always not use galis, but of course, use really sharp language at times. It's required. But no galis and no shouting and screaming. Very calmly, I would explain. And that brought about a big, huge change in terms of culture and environment. I knew all their birthdays, I knew their anniversaries. And I had made it a rule that on your birthday and anniversary, you get the day off. And if you had an important call, at least you take half the day off. So this created a culture in which there was trust and openness. And I think that was, to a large extent, the reason for my success, because my team just loved. Uh, they would die for me. That is the kind of teams I've led.
Amazing. That's amazing. I think, really leading, like you mentioned, leading with empathy and curiosity and showcasing a very clear argument that it's not you versus me. We are in the
It's
same
not you
team.
versus me. Absolutely. It is more us together creating an ecosystem and a culture where everybody can thrive and succeed. Because our goal is common, to enable our teams to succeed. You're a regional or a zonal head. I'm a national head. If you don't succeed, I can't succeed. Without people, a manager is nothing, right? We are
Mm,
dependent on people to achieve success. And those who actually fuel our power path towards success, we cannot ignore how they think or feel.
mm.
And they say, right, that people may forget what you said, but they never forget how you make them feel. And that's why it's important not to humiliate or insult in public and take this conversation into a private zone.
I love that. I love that. That reminds me of a saying, praise in public, criticize in private, and
Absolutely.
definitely the respect and the, like you mentioned, that person is still continues to be a good person and a good friend of yours. Great. So tell me, Chitra, like, do you feel like as you became national head, as you started growing up the ranks, did you encourage more women to join the workforce compared to maybe a counterpart in another bank or in another branch or in another company? Did you feel that you played a role in ensuring gender equality, or was it just like whoever did the best job, that's who I selected?
No, I wouldn't say that I was unbiased, because I did see that I grew in the banking world because of the support I got from my mentors and managers. And I was quite sure I wanted to be that kind of manager and mentor for my team. And that's why I actively recruited women into my team, and I actively took an interest in their lives. You won't believe it. Sometimes I've had to talk to mothers in law. Sometimes I've even talked to husbands to convince them that she can continue in her career and do justice to her household responsibilities, because you know that for a woman there's a lot of expectation and there is a lot of pressure. Child care, elder care, domestic responsibilities, a lot of it comes on her head. And 15-20 years back things were different. There is more of a culture of equality now, but at that time there were things which were very different. Even now, I would say, in India, Asia, across Asia, we still have a male dominated society, and we still have a lot of biases when it comes to who looks after children, who takes off, and so on. So I try to encourage more women. My team was, in fact, 50-50, always women and men. But I again realized that my impact was limited to my team or to my bank. And I wanted to create and multiply impact and include more women into banking. That's why, again, Sales Women Mentoring came in to create and multiply impact and reach out to a larger cross section of women, and also help them to combat the traditional gender biases which dominate the world we live and work in. Because a lot of women give up due to these biases and prejudices and the expectations which weigh so heavily on us, that you're supposed to be a perfect wife, perfect mother, perfect, etc., etc. And in all this perfectionism, what gets lost is you yourself. So you forget to care for yourself, and the burnout and the attrition starts. So I did take a lot of interest in their lives just in order to understand what I could do in order to enable and support them to go further in their careers, which meant that sometimes flexible work from home and so on. In those times when there was no policy for that, I used to give them leave to work from home at times, or go directly from their customer calls home, or go directly to the customer calls without coming to the bank and so on. this permission was not available to everybody because we had to log in every day. But for these people, I had given that special permission because if you're making a call 1 kilometer from home, there's no point coming back 15 kilometers all the way to office. So this is the kind of flexibility I had given them. Even in terms of timings, I would make sure that there was a car if it was beyond 9 p.m. And this was later on made a policy that women would be dropped. And now, in most of the contact centers and night shifts, all the people are dropped. At that time, again, there was nothing because there were fewer women. So policies were not made for women because there were so few. I started all that at a time when it wasn't even there.
So I'd like to, look at the flip side, Chitra. Like obviously, there is a way that, a lot of people say, when men say, oh, there's partiality, oh, they're getting special privileges. And then there is starts to build up as to why do they get that? Why don't I get that? As men, that's not fair. That's not fair. That's one part of things. There's also the side, and I'm not stereotyping this only to women. This happens for men as well. But there's also the time when women also tend to take that little extra because they feel like they can manipulate the system and anything like that. And that also leads to a little bit of resentment from the male team and things like that. Obviously, while there is moderation that's required, you don't want it to get to your head where, oh, she thinks she's the boss lady, she can just say whatever she wants, and all those things might happen. I've seen that in many organizations where not only in sales, it happens across the board. So I just want to curious, if a woman is acting in the same way that a chauvinistic male boss or a male would act and saying, oh, this is the way that I've survived this world by being like this, by being like mean or like pushy or whatever it might be. Like, what would you say to the people who are looking up to those kind of bosses and saying that's the way things should be?
Yeah, so you brought about a very interesting point here that the same behavior in a man, if he's loud, say, or if he's opinionated, it is considered bold and it is considered assertive. And it is something which is accepted by the team and by society. And the same behavior in a woman, if she's bold, if she's opinionated, she's called aggressive, she's called brash. And several times during my career, I've been called aggressive and I've been called brash. So I would say that there's no point in letting this chatter and this noise affect you. You don't need to depend on external validation. Your work does show and it does speak for itself. And over and above that, you need to advocate for yourself, own your achievements, and talk about them openly. A lot of women believe that you just put your head down and work, you show your numbers, you show your work, and people will automatically give you a promotion. It doesn't happen. You have to be vocal about your achievements. You have to own them. You have to talk about them at every forum which matters. Self advocacy is very important. Voice is important. Visibility is important. So I keep telling women this formula is VVA: visibility, voice, advocacy. And talk about your achievements, maintain an achievement diary, and be open about your ambitions and aspirations, because often people assume on your behalf that, oh, she's just had a child, she may not be ready for the next promotion, or she may not be ready for the next responsibility, and so on. So talk about it. If you don't own your career, somebody else will start writing your story for you. And that applies to life also, right? If you don't own your story, somebody else will write your story for you. And that's what I've told all women. And now coming to men thinking that women are given special favors. Yes, we need to work doubly hard to prove ourselves, especially when you have a team which is full of men. And most of the time, I had teams which were male dominated, and I changed the ratio little by little. But the teams I inherited were mostly always, 5 men with one woman, and so on. And I had to work doubly hard to prove myself. And in many cases, prove them wrong. For example, I took over this responsibility as regional head sales in ICICI Bank. I think I was the first woman regional head sales. Yeah, out of 26 regional head sales. And I went to Chennai. It was in October, November, and that's the time when it rains in Chennai. And again, knee deep water and Saukar Pet, where the jewelers. And we had a call with the jewelers, and my reporter tells me, ma'am, it's not a right place for you to go. Small streets, car won't go. You'll have to walk, and it'll all be dirty. And this, obviously, trying to test me and prove that I am, too delicate to go for these calls. I just rolled up my salwar suit and I said, chalo, let's go. And we went. And I'm a Tamilian, so fortunately I could speak in Tamil, and the call went fabulously, because, when you can speak a common language and you find a common connection with the customer, they are delighted. And I started talking, name is Chitra Singh, but speaking fluent Tamil. Customer was delighted, call went fabulously. So before the call, there was this whole sense of disbelief, or maybe even mistrust that she can't do this. And after the call, because we got the money in and the customer was delighted, it changed the perception. So we have to work doubly hard. But again, none of this is personal. like you said. And if we keep understanding that people come in with their own set of biases and prejudices, and that's what makes them human beings. And even women have biases, right? For example, women believe that all men are dominating. All men are like this. We also generalize. So we just believe that, assume that there's positive intent and assume each situation with positive intent, and assume also that they are doing the best they can with the information they have. And until you prove them otherwise, they will continue to believe what they were believing otherwise. Even in sales, that's what we believe, right? When we go into a sales conversation with negative intent, assuming that the customer is going to say no, the customer is not going to like my offer, that's the energy we carry into the conversation. And the customer can sense that, because energy is contagious. That's why when I see you smiling, I smile automatically. I kind of reflect back your emotions and your energy. We see a movie which is happy, we smile. Sad movie, we cry. So it's the same thing. The energy which you bring into every conversation, whether it's with a customer, whether it's with a team member, or whether it's your boss, is the energy you get reflected back. So I assume positive intent and innocent till proven guilty. That's the way I go into the conversation. If I encounter situations in which there is directly a bias, or directly there's something which is said which is hurtful, then I take it up in private. But yes, women have to work doubly hard. And
Mm,
there's something called the double bind dilemma. That is, if you are opinionated and bold, you're considered too brash, too aggressive. And if you are a little softer, then you're considered too soft, too emotional to be a leader. So we keep walking this tightrope between being feminine and using our feminine qualities to succeed, and becoming masculine. And most women believe that they need to turn into little men in suits in order to succeed. But that's not true. We all know that women in sales do much better. Their closing rates are better, their win rates are higher, and these are all proven figures by Exactly and Gong. And yet they get paid 21% less. So there is still a fact that women are undervalued and undercompensated and underrepresented in sales. These three U's, which a lot of us, like you, me, all of us who've done well in sales or who have communities and platforms which promote sales, must promote actively. That
mm,
hiring women is not a liability or a burden. It does pay off in terms of returns, because the average value of the deals they close also is again $5,000 higher. You could go and check back with those figures in Gong and Exactly. And therefore, it makes business sense, not only diversity sense.
great, amazing. So speaking of hiring, right, I always like to talk about a few things on this show where we talk about hiring, training, and management or leadership. We've touched upon a bit of the leadership aspects in the beginning of this conversation. So I'd really love to go into the next part where you talk about hiring, right? Whether it be a man or a woman, we keep that out. But in terms of finding the right person that you feel, okay, I feel that this is the best candidate for this job. Leave a bias, like, I mean, in terms of the skills, which again, they have to be able to showcase in some shape or form. But what is it that you really look for when you're hiring somebody, or when you're training somebody to get hired? What are the aspects and the important things that someone needs to keep in mind when they are getting hired and when you are deciding on hiring somebody, so that that's not an expensive mistake?
So one of my favorite quotes is from Zig Ziglar: "Your attitude determines your altitude." So I hire for attitude and train for skill. That's what I've always believed, that skills can be taught, skills can be practiced, especially in sales. They need a lot of practice, but you can help with the practice. It's mindset, which requires a lot of work on, and it is attitude, which determines how much and how well you can do in sales. So I always hire for attitude, see whether they have the passion, whether they have a service orientation. And this I used to do by giving them scenarios in which I would say, X is the scenario, and then how would you react? And I would know from that. So my interview would never be, okay, tell me about yourself, is that. Of course, I would start with that. But I would talk more about their lives, what hardships they faced, what challenges, what it taught them, how it helped them become better. Those who say they gave up and they had a very hard life and they keep complaining and cribbing, that they are the ones who will use failure as an excuse. Whereas the others who say, yeah, I had this, but I did this, and then I found this way, and then I went to college, and then I did this, that they are resilient and they are not faced by obstacles. They have the determination and the willpower to succeed, and they don't believe that their lives um, control is in someone else's hands. They take control and take charge of their lives and use positive self talk to motivate themselves towards their purpose. So I see these things, like I already mentioned: attitude, overall, service orientation, how they would deal with certain scenarios in which they would be customer facing, the hardships, challenges they faced, what has failure taught them, what has success taught them. because often they become overconfident. And based on that, I would take, again, at that time, the psychological tests were very few, but now there are many, many assessments to see, psychometric tests to see whether a person has the kind of orientation, which is mostly ability to deal with failure, rejection, the resilience to bounce back, attitude, communication, leadership skills. Because in a sales conversation, irrespective of whether you are a individual contributor or a team lead, you have to lead the conversation. If you leave the conversation and the progress in the customer's hands, you will keep going in a loop. So you have to lead, and you have to know how to lead, again, with humility and with empathy, not in a way which is dominating, because then the customer again will leave. So if they are able to lead, even at very junior levels, you see that they would have been leaders, they would have been part of some youth club, or they would have participated in team sports. All these surrogates I would use to assess whether they have the right skills and attitude. And of course, a passion for selling. It should not be something that they are falling into by default, or because they've got 38% as what is that Rocket Singh salesperson of the year. He says, Mujhe 38% mile. And I thought that was so derogatory towards salespeople, as if we don't have any other job, we don't get any other job, we're too dumb, and therefore we get it. I don't believe in this 38% scenario. I would definitely look at passion, education, experience, attitude, failures, successes, what it has taught them, how they deal with challenges, and then hire them.
And I think, 99% of the most successful millionaires and billionaires all started off as salespeople. And
Absolutely,
were able to
absolutely.
take
You're
it
so
there.
right. One of the most famous is Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett started off as that. And very interestingly, very close home, finance minister, Mrs. Nirmala Sitaraman, started off as a shop girl in a shop in sales assistant in a shop in Regent Street in London,
Mm,
where her husband was
amazing.
posted. Yeah, and I keep saying that. And I keep saying that, look at closer home also. Whether it's Warren Buffett or whether it's the most successful people across the world
Exactly.
have started in sales, because they know how to deal with customers. Without the customer, there is no business. The
Mm,
business does not survive. And I keep saying that sales is a life saving and a business saving skill, because without sales, there's no customer, and without that, there's no business. So nobody's job would be safe, nobody's livelihood would be safe, and the business would shut down. So it is a survival skill
exactly.
and a life skill. It's not merely meant only for salespeople or for the folks out there serving the customer. It is meant for everybody, whether you need to negotiate for a raise or a promotion, or even with your family, your husband to take over more responsibilities at home, with your children to eat more vegetables, with your investor for a fund raise round. Everywhere we are using selling, and we are promoting ourselves and our brand. And if you cannot do that, you struggle throughout in your business as well as in your life.
Exactly. So speaking of, you mentioned earlier about, hiring for attitude and not skills, and skills can be taught later. This is something which I come across a lot, where you mentioned also just now that people from the natural age of being a child, whether they have to negotiate for a chocolate or as a child, or whether they have to negotiate their salary, or whether they have to just find the right prices for their vegetables, they're naturally inclined to sell or to negotiate, right? And this is something which we typically learn from people around us, either our parents, our grandparents, or maybe an uncle and an aunt as we grow up, and then we realize, okay, maybe a
Maybe I can do
boss,
this too. Yeah.
yeah, I can do this. Maybe I'm good at this. However, what I also see is that some people tend to think that sales is like talking, trying to overpower, speaking too much, and then just finally shutting up the other person and getting them to agree to what they are saying, because they feel like they've won. Okay, I've said more, I've justified more, I've said all the right things to trigger them. This is sort of like coming very natural. And what I also see is that, okay, while that might work, is that a sustainable way to move forward? That's one, because we never really had any formal sales training back in the day, right? Sales training as a format maybe has been there in organizations on a very small level and has now gained popularity. And coaches like yourself have also gone independent and starting to teach people in the outside market. So my question to you, is there a way that people who have learned sales in a certain way now need to maybe unlearn certain things in a certain way that the organization has been selling successfully, rather than being shooting from the hip and saying, no, this is what works for me and has been working for me, and I'm not going to change my ways? Or on the flip side, someone who's like, I have no experience in sales, I just speak and I somehow I'm able to get the conversions. It might take longer than expected. I might not hit my targets as per the time which you are expecting, but I will get that sale. Don't worry, you can count on me. Now, when it comes to these two sides of the things, this guy is being a little very pushy, maybe losing the sale. This person is being too gentle, not getting the sale in time. Obviously, training has to come into the picture. Some sort of improvement has to be put into place. So, how do you, or how have you seen in the maybe banking industry as an example? Maybe you could tell me about it. And how does it work in other industries where companies take that responsibility? Or is it the onus of the individual to take that responsibility to be able to one, obviously get the results, but also B, working in a certain system and a fashion which the company believes in?
Yeah, so you are right that most companies do not provide enough of support and resources. And it's only lately that we have coaches and we have mentors coming in. And even then, the coaching or the mentorship being expensive is not done at the junior levels. It's more training interventions, which are 1 day workshops or 2 day workshops with 100 people, 50 people, which are done, which are not really effective because 48 hours later, they have forgotten everything which you have taught them. So a lot still depends on the individual's attitude and the individual's learning, which is why we need more and more of them to take on mentorship, even if it is in groups, in order to maybe reduce the expenses for corporates. They should do it in groups. So in my workshops, what I say is that just merely having 2 days of workshops on communication skills, influencing skills, negotiating, etc., 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 objection handling, the usual sales topics which people do, is not going to help. What I say is that I will follow up every day session with 1.5 hours of deep one-on-one mentoring, and I don't do it alone. I do it with 1:6 or 7 ratio, which means that we divide the batch into groups of 6 or 7. And then we take on this batch with one mentor. And I have 10 or 12 mentors like me within my community. And there are 2,000 members. Many of them belong to corporates through whom we get the training programs, of course. So we divide them into batches and have 3 or 4 or 5 mentors depending on the batch size. And these are the ones who offer them mentoring. And we follow a framework which I can share with you. And it is called Mike. And the reason I'm saying is because there are 4 C's. And I'll just go briefly into each one of them. The first is on the mindset, which I talked about even earlier, that we need to bring about a mindset shift because most people perceive sales to be something which is dirty, manipulative, pushy, and you just make the customer buy. You force the customer, somehow you get the sale. And that's not the right way to sell. So the first thing we need to do is to understand their mindset about selling. Like you said, a lot of us are influenced by our childhood where we've seen our parents bargaining with vendors, or maybe we've seen some credit card salesperson and or something which has influenced us and made us think that this person is not really a nice person, or she is taking advantage of the situation to close this deal in her favor or his favor. And that's not what I want to be when I sell. So who am I when I sell? Am I this unethical, manipulative person? Then I'd rather not sell and I want to run away from selling. Most people are like that. So that is why they are hesitant sellers. In fact, 70%, it's a proven survey again, 70% of sellers are sales phobic. Whether they are founders, startup owners, they are sales phobic. 5% are evangelists. 15% are sales lovers. Only 10% are, only 5% are sales evangelists. So which means that 70% of them are sales phobes and the rest are divided between sales learners, sales lovers, and sales evangelists. And obviously, the evangelists are the highest category because they are the ones who are like you and me, who want to actively promote sales, who want to actively elevate it as a profession of pride and choice for people. And we are proud of being salespeople. There are only 5% of them. And the remaining are, say, 15 and 10, which are either sales lovers or sales learners, which is also good because they do love selling. So because of this whole mindset that I don't like selling and it's not meant for me and I don't like who I am when I sell, I don't want to sell. This is the mindset which needs to shift. The second problem which comes with most women, especially, is they hesitate to ask for money because they question their own value. And in their minds, they feel like an imposter when they ask for money. Am I really worth it? Am I providing this kind of value? And they keep questioning this to an extent the customer can read their hesitancy and either pushes the deal to such an extent it becomes unviable, or simply doesn't deal with them because they sense their hesitation and nervousness and their lack of conviction in this is the mindset they come with. The first one is, of course, that sales is something which is unethical. The second is the mindset regarding money. And that's why if you see that 60% of women actually don't take independent financial decisions, they're dependent on their fathers, husbands, etc., etc., which is why they're very uncomfortable around managing money or talking about money. Both these act as deterrents in sales. And this is what we work on first. The mindset with an assessment, asking them about their childhood experiences which shaped selling and telling them to reposition selling in their minds as an exchange of value. I give value, therefore I deserve to receive value. And I talk about deservability a lot, that I'm worth that value because I'm giving value. And you write down a value statement that this is the value I'm providing so that you're clear about the value you're offering. And that shifts your entire perspective about selling. So the second one, which I talked about in this MICCC, is the identity shifts, because who I am is how I sell, and what I believe is how I'll behave. So we talked about those beliefs, that limiting beliefs, that selling is not for me because of it's manipulative, it's pushy, etc. All these limiting beliefs, they hold you back from being your best as a seller. And that's why you need to shift your identity from I am selling merely for my own gain and to meet my own ends to I am selling to serve, to help others, and to give value to them and help them achieve the outcomes they want. When you do this, your identity as a seller shifts. So that is M and I. And the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, very briefly, I will tell you, it's all about authentic communication, which we talked about, transparency, honesty. It's about clarity in terms of value. It's about conviction in your offering, because that's the energy which the customer will catch. And it's about the courage to say the right things to the customer, because you must have the courage to say no to the wrong deals. You must have the courage not to overpromise and underdeliver. You must have the courage to not promise things which you can't give, or talk about features which you're not able to provide to the customer. That courage is very important. And these are the last four C's. This is the framework we use. And through assessments, through guided prompts, through reflection exercises over both WhatsApp, online, offline, and in the classroom, we guide people through this entire journey. Because, like Edmund Hillary has said, we need to conquer our mind first before we conquer the mountain. And sales for them is almost like a mountain, and they need to win in their minds first. And they need to see themselves as ethical, honest sellers before they can go out there and win over the customer, right? So you would need to win in your mind first. The first battle starts here. And that's why it's an inside out job. People look at it as an outside in job. I focus on the customer, I talk to him or her, and I convince, etc. It's an inside out job. And you win within yourself. It's half the battle won. And then you go and meet the customer. So I tell them that, in fact, for the first 1 month, don't even sell. Just use these reflections and prompts. We have a WhatsApp prompts, sell with confidence challenge. And in 14 days, I can challenge you that this person will change their entire mindset about selling, and their whole identity shifts. And women come back and tell me, I never thought of it this way, that I offer unique value, which no one else offers in the market. And as part of this, we also help them to position their unique value proposition, which, everyone struggles with. If I tell them in 60 seconds, tell me what you do, who you help, what outcomes you produce, and how you're different from everybody else in the market, people are not able to articulate it. Or if I tell them, tell me a story which demonstrates that you provide this value, they're not able to tell me in 1 or 2 minutes a small success story or a testimonial which proves this. And that's why we teach them the unique value statement, the simplest form of which is I help X to do Y by doing Z. And add to this social proof, which is a testimonial or numbers, and a CTA. So I help them to frame this statement and then keep on reframing and practicing it till it becomes under 60 seconds, and also articulate a story around it, which helps them to give proof that this works and the customer can trust them. This unique value proposition defining exercise gives them a lot of clarity, because when they believe that I'm offering value, then they also believe that they deserve to ask for value, and it changes their entire perspective on sales. So I talk about identity and mindset shifts. Techniques, frameworks, challenger sales, pin, etc., band, this, that. All of us know it. That's why we are sellers. And yes, at the core of selling are those. You need to use techniques and frameworks to give structure and follow a set process from prospecting to close and nurture. But you cannot beat your mindset, which is to start with, which is why it is MICCCC.
Amazing. I mean, if you could just remind our audience, M for mindset, I for identity.
I for identity shift, because I keep saying who you are is how you sell, and what you believe is how you'll behave. Right. So if I believe that selling is unethical, I may also be forced to behave in those ways, or else I may simply run away from selling and believe it's not for me. That's why an identity shift is very important. Winning in your mind is more important than winning on the field, because the first battle you fight is in your own mind. So sales is an inside out job. And the last four, which are the C, are clarity in terms of the value, where I talked about the unique value proposition, which needs to be valuable, differentiated, and substantiated with proof for the customer to believe you. And I gave a short framework, right? I help X to do Y by doing Z. And then it is being able to communicate with authenticity. It is having the courage to say no to the wrong deals, to the wrong customer. And it is about consistency too. Consistency in terms of follow up, consistency in terms of action, because selling, is not just one effort one day. Most people believe that, oh, when I need to find a business, then I will start prospecting. But you and I know that you have to always be prospecting, otherwise the well will dry up. And after the well is dry, you can't start digging for water, right? Or when you're thirsty. So I always tell them, always be prospecting, always build relationships and connections. Because again, sales is a landscape which constantly shifts. Relationships and bonds are what survive. So consistency in terms of action, picking up the phone every day, doing your calls, doing your blocking time for prospecting, blocking time for follow up, getting over your hesitation or your procrastination in order to reach out to customers. That's what will pay results. Consistency, even though it's boring, just like in exercise or in health, consistency gives you results. In sales, it's the same.
Fantastic. I absolutely love that formula, my CCCC. Amazing, Chitra. So, Chitra, tell us, how does someone get in touch with you in case they are listening right now and they're like, I want to learn from Chitra? What's the best place to catch you? What's the process to enroll with you? And of course, the outcomes are unlimited, is from what I can see, is based on what they do. But tell us, how does one begin their journey with you?
Yes, so you can reach out through our website, which is saleswomentoring.com. And that is SalesWomentoring. And the idea came from mentoring women in sales. And of course, I found that later on, founders and startup owners, men or women, faced similar challenges and constraints. And so now we have extended the mentorship, the corporate or business mentorship, to men also. Corporate meaning men sales leaders, and business meaning men who are founders and startup owners. So one way is through my website. Second is through my LinkedIn handle, where I'm Chitra Singh Sampat Kumar. Sampat Kumar being my maiden name. And I have a lot of followership on LinkedIn. So I'm sure they can check out my posts. They'll find a lot of value there. And the third way is either you DM me or call me. My number is there everywhere, even on LinkedIn. And I'm happy to answer calls on DM, either on LinkedIn or on calls. And I tell a lot of women, again, they tell me that it's very dangerous, risky to provide your number on LinkedIn. So I told them, we're not Aishwarya Rai. The whole world is not going to start calling us, and we can always block them. So I tell them that don't be reclusive in the desire to be safe. Make it easy for people to find you. Make it easy for people to know you. Because again, there is a sales lesson there, right? If people don't know you, they won't like you or trust you, and they won't buy from you. So important that people know you and about you and how to reach you in order for you to be successful in promoting your brand. So you can reach me on LinkedIn, through our website, call, DM, message.
Fantastic. Amazing. I will be putting down those links in the show notes in this episode as well, in case you guys want to catch that as well. Well, Chitra, thank you so much for sharing all your words of wisdom and so many amazing golden nuggets. I think, people will have to rewind this episode once again just to kind of re-grasp all the amazing information and knowledge and wisdom that you've shared. And this is the last part of the show where I usually come, which is the kind of rapid fire round. Just 3-4 questions where, just off the top of your mind, what comes to your mind? And if you want to tell me why that answer, feel free as well. I'm going to hit you with a few questions and ready whenever you are. You ready? All right. What's your all-time favorite book or movie?
I read a book on negotiating by Chris Voss. I think that had some golden nuggets. So
Never
that
Split
was one
the
book.
Difference, right?
Yes, Never Split the Difference. That was one I really loved. And I am also reading a book from Brené Brown about Dare to Lead. And again, it talks a lot about how people should lead, women or men, and a lot about courage over comfort and doing what is right, which is what I talk about even in selling, that do what is right. Do what is right for the customer, not what is easy for you. And a lot of us take the easy route out in life and in selling. And that was the main lesson which stayed with me even through Brené Brown's book about integrity and courage over comfort. And with Chris Voss's book, of course, there were a lot of takeaways, but the way he talks about negotiating being a landscape in which you don't have to win at any cost, where you need to be present with empathy and understand the worldview and the perspective of the other person before you are able to even put your point across. He talks about anchoring bias. He talks about the initial number you put in, which anchors their entire negotiation strategy. He talks about getting them to say 2 words, which is that's right, instead of you are right. Because the minute they say you are right, there is a kind of discomfort. They feel they've lost control. But the minute they say that's right, they feel you get them. And then they are on your side. And the last thing which you talked about was make them feel that the outcome is their idea. Lead the conversation in such a way that they feel that they are suggesting it rather than you pushing it on them. All these were really interesting. So one sales book and one leadership book, Dare to Lead.
Yeah. I really like also the point what he makes in the book where he says, just repeat the last sentence that they said
The
to get
mirroring,
them to.
paraphrasing, yeah, those were absolutely essential. And he talks about summarizing, right? Which is both paraphrasing plus the emotions, where you say, I understand how you feel. This must have been hard. It must have been difficult for you. Because again, how people feel and you showing that you understand how they feel is more important than merely repeating their words.
Exactly. That's definitely one of my top 5 books as well. Thank you for so much for sharing. Next question. Most inspiring personality, dead or alive?
I would say Michelle Obama because she's had the courage to carve an identity for herself and own her voice and speak her truth. Even though her husband was one of the most, dominating personalities in US politics, she could have been lost in the shadows or just been another, what would I say, decorative wife. But she chose to carve her own identity, speak her truth, find her voice, and she stood up for what she believes in, whether it is Black women, whether it is women in general, and women who of color face more discrimination than men of color too. And so it's like a double problem. And she's spoken up for that. Her book Becoming Again is something which I liked a lot. So I admire her a lot. Closer home, I think again Nirmala Sitaraman, though she's very unpopular at the moment because of the budget. But I do like the fact that she's made it in a male-dominated world, and it's not very easy to make it. And of course, there are women in banking. Kalpana Morparia was there. Chanda Kochar was there. Later on, she fell from grace due to a lot of reasons, but her leadership style was unparalleled. And she was a humble and very graceful leader. There are lots of people like this in the banking world, closer home, whom I've admired.
Thank you so much for sharing those. So, the third question. If we were to take you and leave you on a deserted island for 7 days, no electricity, no internet, just Mother Nature, you have shelter, you have food, and you were able to just take one thing along with you, what would that be?
Me, myself, I don't want to take anything else. Me, myself, because I love to sing, I love to dance, I make my own music. I'm a happy person. So I'm quite content with my own company. And I'll entertain myself singing, dancing. So I think it's very important to be comfortable with yourself first and not seek out external ways of being happy because happiness, again, like sales, is an inside job. And you need to find your happiness within yourself. If you're dependent on it, on other things or people or possessions for happiness, you rarely find it because they always the benchmark can keep going higher and higher, more money, more love, more security, more houses, etc. So I believe happiness lies within me. Whatever is the situation around me, I must learn to confront the reality of the situation whilst also believing that the future will be brighter, right? So we must be pragmatic enough to understand the reality of the current situation and also be optimistic enough to believe that the future will be brighter and better because without hope then everything else is lost. And this is also there in a book called Good to Great, which is another of my favorite books, Stockdale Paradox, where Jim Collins talks about this Admiral Stockdale who spent 8 years, was tortured 20 times in those 8 years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam. And this is what helped him see through these tough, difficult times, that he confronted the facts, brutal facts of his current reality, that he was a prisoner, yeah. And, but also he had the faith that in the future he would be set free, and he was set free in the end. So that's something which had a deep impression on me. And I think that I would do the same, believe that the future will be brighter.
Amazing. I really love that. And, I've heard a lot of people talk to me about the same question on the show where whether they'll bring, a yoga mat or they'll bring a book or they'll bring something. And you're probably the first person who said, I'm going to just bring myself and be
Be
myself.
mindful.
And it's really interesting because I was reading somewhere, there's a big difference between being lonely and being alone.
Absolutely.
What you just said is being able to be at peace with yourself and communicate because there is obviously a higher power that we have within us that is right here in our minds. And that's what makes or breaks you.
Yes, whatever you seek is within you. So we find the answers within ourselves, and that's why in India we believe, right? Meditation, yoga, looking inwards is what helps you to find answers outside, especially in this chaotic world. Now we have this volatile world. We don't know when war will break out, what will happen. It's important to look inwards and find peace and happiness within yourself. Otherwise, everything is too chaotic around you.
100% agree with that. Great, Chitra. My last question is going to be a tough one because you have been giving so many amazing words of wisdom to our audience over here. And usually I ask, what are your words of wisdom? But I'll put a little bit of spin to this for this sake. I want you to share your words of wisdom for someone who's struggling right now. Maybe their life is not going as per expected. Maybe their plans have been totally taken off track. Maybe they've lost a job. Maybe, they're not hitting their targets as per what is expected and they're soon to be axed. Maybe something is not going right for them. What would be your words of wisdom to help someone think about it and overcome that challenge based on your experience?
I would say don't let failures defeat you or destroy you. And when you don't let failures define who you are, your self belief whisper you towards your success goals. So believe in yourself and keep doing what you can do with what you have. And I'm sure success will follow.
Amazing. I love that. I absolutely love that. Believe in yourself. Don't let failure bring you down. And good, great things will happen if you keep consistent. And of course, if they are able to follow your mic thing in general life, also, I find it very, very interesting. Just take care of your mindset, your identity, courage, consistency, what was communication,
Consistent action,
all
communication.
of that. It applies in general life because, like you mentioned, also we are always selling ourselves as individuals. We are representing ourselves in the best way to serve. And what I really found really interesting in this entire conversation is not even once did we say that sales is to make money. Everything that was
Money is a
mentioned.
byproduct. It's how you make the customer feel because we all know that customers don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And they also buy, that is what Simon Sinek says. It's not me, my original, but they also buy how you make them feel. And most importantly, what you help them to become once they use your product or service. So that is the aspirational level of service. Most sellers are stuck at the functional level, talking about the features. But you need to go into the emotional drivers and the aspirational, which is how you make them feel and what you help them to become. That's another journey which of self-actualization which every seller needs to need.
Absolutely love it. Great. Thank you so much, Chitra, for joining us on this show. It's been absolutely amazing having you here. And I do look forward to having you again in the very near future. That's it for this episode, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Thank you so much for listening to the Killer Sales Engine podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and I'm soon launching on Apple as well. I will be leaving that notification. If you're not following us on Instagram or on LinkedIn, I highly recommend you come and check that out. And if you do want to know more information about Chitra, I have put the information in the show notes over here. Thank you again, Chitra, for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for being such a patient and lovely listener. Would love to hear your comments. Until the next time, thank you and good night.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.